June 3, 2025, people of Africa, receive our greetings as usual. Today, we have once again decided to respond to those oddballs who wander from one talk show to another propaganda media, going from set to set. Especially, he is usually on France 24. Who are we talking about? About Wassim Nasser, this DGSE agent, sent on a mission deployed against the countries of the Sahel. His specialty, communication, trying to bring people together. He knows nothing about Mali, has never been to Mali, has never set foot in Kidal, no Gao, no Timbuktu, has never been anywhere in Mali. It's him from an office in Paris who keeps whining, who keeps shouting, who keeps telling stories that make no sense, that don't even match the reality on the ground. Once again, we find it necessary to debunk disinformation. We understand some of our comrades who often tell us that it's not worth responding to people like that. In our culture, in Bamara, there's a saying that suggests it's pointless to let lies pile up, to let falsehoods multiply. Often one should respond, is it really worth it? Especially when it comes to Serge Daniel's boss, because he's on a higher level, a much higher level than Serge Daniel. Let us not forget that Emmanuel Macron himself had not only ordered the creation of a propaganda channel against Eastern countries to see in what way they could stop our liberation, but that has been unsuccessful. The same Emmanuel Macron, in this same context, had suggested that the existing media should be strengthened. He even mentioned France Medias Monde. Now, when we look at France Medias Monde, we have RFI in it, we have France 24 in it, and we have other media outlets within it. And as for France Medias Monde, the largest shareholder, the one who funds France Medias Monde the most, is of course the French state. So what Wassim Nasser is doing, what Serge Daniel and others are doing, trying to spread misinformation, to give the impression that Mali itself is finished, that it's over for Mali. Where did they get this from? Who funds them? Who supports them? I think you already have the answer. Along these lines, the first piece of information we get from this Mr. Wassim Nasser is when he says in Timbuktu that 6 assailants were killed. That's not true. The official statement from Mali, at the very least, Malian officials mentioned no fewer than 14 terrorists who were neutralized. So where does he get the figure of 6 assailants from? Oh, no. And moreover, what he doesn't mention is that the sweeps continued in Timbuktu, both inside and outside the city. And that also includes the NATO Algerian mercenaries who were eliminated. That he didn't mention. And even more seriously, the journalist who reported it said that the fighting was still ongoing in Timbuktu. The fighting was no longer ongoing. We did not swear. We take this opportunity to salute the zone commander of Timbuktu, General Colonel Nyangadu, a very powerful colonel. We salute him along with his men. The work was clean, very quick, very effective. And this is what we expect more and more in the AS area. They beat the dust. And that Wassim Nasser tried to cover up. The title of their program focused solely, almost solely, on the attack in Timbuktu. It was Timbuktu that they put in the spotlight, but then they mentioned the Boulekis or Diora. He spent more time on Boulekis and Diora. In the attack on Timbuktu, he only lasted 50 to 39 seconds. However, the segments in question lasted 8 minutes. So 59 seconds on Timbuktu, and the rest of the time spent spreading nonsense and lies about Boulekis and Diora. But I take away an important lesson from his disinformation. It's when he mentions the way he talks about a former colonel of the Malian army who supposedly took part in the attack on Diora. That's where they end up proving us right. That the very thing they created, the bomb, they set off against African countries, which they called democracies, the bomb, that ended up defeating us. Because why? People who had been integrated into the Malian army, and under what circumstances? As part of a so-called peace agreement supervised by Algiers. Don't forget that in 1996, many of our army's weapons, through self-defense groups like Gandakoi and others, were burned. Weapons burned, set on fire, supposedly because a strong democracy doesn't need an army. Forgetting that the countries which fund the most democracies in the world, the United States, have more than 700 military bases worldwide and the largest military spending budget in the world. So, where did our so-called Democrats go to school? Where did they learn that a democracy doesn't need an army? the 3 permanent members of the Security Council who claim to be the world's great democracy, United States first, then Great Britain and France. All 3 of these countries, each of them possesses nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons aren't meant for killing sheep. They are not for hunting game in the bush. They are meant to carry out mass slaughter of human beings. They are the ones who possess such weapons. I wonder where Africans really went to the school of the imperialists to the point of believing that we don't need an army and that the masters' colonial narratives alone are enough to subjugate African countries. China has a strong army. Russia has a strong army. Even Germany. But on what grounds were the former French colonies made to believe, with the so-called lawyers and others who were in Paris and then sent here, and people who were proclaimed, who were said to be Democrats from then on it, was all just smoke and mirrors? I'm telling you, the president they call the first democratically elected president of Mali, the one they're talking about, President Alpha Conakry. I must remind you that he was Minister of Youth under President Moussa Traoré, who is said to be the greatest dictator Mali has ever had. That's how some people present him. Alpha was his Minister of Youth. How can a former Minister of President Moussa Traoré, as they say, the dictator Moussa Traoré, become the greatest Democrat to the point of being the first democratically elected president? That's not true. So when Wasim Nasser says that a former colonel, well, it was the so-called Democrats who integrated these armed bandits into our armed forces, giving them ranks that suited them. Some of them joined without ever having been in what? Exactly. They call themselves colonels, some lieutenants, others captains. Ibrahim Bahanga, who attacked Mali in 2006, was integrated into the Malian army under an agreement supervised by Algiers. Hassan Fagaga, who was proclaimed interim chief of Kidal and was eliminated by our armed forces, had been integrated by the so-called Democrats. Have Africans really understood this whole democracy thing? How is this a steamroller against African countries? People of Africa, Wasim Nasser, in his lies and misinformation, claims a toll of more than 70 deaths in Bukesi and more than 40 deaths in Diora. I wonder where he got these figures from. Because the communications unit, the division of our army that handles communications, did not provide such numbers, did not give such figures. So I am surprised, because during the Bule Kesi attack, they came in overwhelming numbers. Certainly the officers in charge of that camp, the command, made sure to order the men to fall back. But this is war, is combat. There are casualties on both sides. We shouldn't dramatize things and act as if the others came to fight us dressed in white, like this, like I'm dressed, and left without a stain. That's not possible. Oh no, that's not possible. Their white clothes became very dirty. Yes, they were covered in mud. They were covered in Banku clay. They know exactly what we are talking about. They counted their dead, and especially after that, our aerial assets intervened. And this brings me to the third piece of misinformation from Wasim Nasser and his propaganda media. They claim that Mali's drones, Mali's aerial assets have run out of ammunition. So what? The aerial assets that intervened afterwards in Bukesi, which decimated the terrorist colonists, where did these aerial assets come from? The munitions that were dropped, were they Wasim Nasser's teeth? Was it his teeth that were turned into munitions? Where did you get these munitions from? It doesn't make any sense. And as for the munitions, no one said that the Turks have a monopoly on munitions worldwide. Sure, we bought our combat drones from the Turks, but we never said we couldn't improvise other munitions. We bought our fighter jets at our own risk. So if I understand correctly, what they are trying to say is that the Turks and the Russians met to stop selling munitions to the AS countries. At the same time, they are saying those attacking the eastern countries are being trained on British soil by Ukrainian commandos, and that the Russians are going to deny us the right to arm ourselves to resist the Ukrainian commandos. Wasim Nasser, does that make sense? What logic is there in what you're saying? When you see him sitting, he has papers. He's reading. You realize that he knows nothing about Mali, and everything he's reading comes straight from the DGSE's dark room. But Wasim Nasser, when you are sent, you need to know how to be sent. As President Laurent Gbagbo has always said, there was a lot of disinformation in what you said. Things that make no sense and don't match the reality on the ground. He suggests that the Malian army our army camp has been destroyed. Our camp was not destroyed. Our camp is intact. There were battles, certainly very violent battles. Yes, we do not revise. This is war. We suffered losses. But on the other side, there were even more losses, despite their greater numbers. This is where we should commend the bravery of the men who were deployed on the ground in Bukesi. This is war. But what hasn't been discussed much is, for example, why haven't we talked about Bukesi in Timbuktu? There, they were decimated. That's where they understand our determination. In Timbuktu, they were decimated. In Sumu, they tried to attack one of our positions. They were decimated. In many places across the country, they were decimated. Wasim Nasser even went so far as to mention improvised explosive devices. That's DJC report. We know it's a full vessel. And in the full vessel, they asked these armed bandits, whom he calls jihadists. We don't know any jihadists, Wasim Nasser. If someone needs jihadists to be carried out on their head, maybe it's you. Mali does not know any jihadists. It is in Mali that the city of Timbuktu, the city of 333, exists. It was a former ruler of Mali who made what is perhaps the most famous pilgrimage to Mecca of all kings, of all rulers. That was Kango Musa. So Mali has nothing to learn. From envoys, from Franco-Algerian mercenaries, we have nothing to learn when it comes to religion. And here, everyone practices their religion freely. If you want to join a religion, if you want to be an atheist, you will live peacefully with others. Here, there is that freedom. We are not involved in your nonsense. It's a matter of religion. If it's a matter of religion, do those crooks, those people, deserve to collaborate with Emmanuel Macron? Do they deserve it? We know who Macron is, don't we? They're not jihadists. So the other piece of misinformation from Wasim Nasser is when he says that Al-Gabas wrote to President Erdogan. But wait, he belittled Erdogan, Before Al-Gabas, there was a Malian politician, a Malian political mercenary who's lying on the other side. He was one of the first to write to the Turks to say, no, he's a Malian, a former Malian MP. Yes, a former Malian MP who calls himself a pseudo-democrat. It was him. He was the first to write to the Turks, telling them not to sell drones to the Malian army anymore. I said, but the Turks, they're not giving us that for free. We buy, we pay. We pay, they need money. We need money, they need money. There are many countries in the world that produce drones. Right here in Mali, there are already people who are starting to produce certain drones. Maybe they're not very advanced yet. But then, they say it was Al-Gabas who wrote that Jenim also complained that Mali's drones are hitting civilians. But I say, those who have taken up arms, those who recruit children, those who commit massacres, who burn crops, and who are attacking infrastructure, who attack a hydroelectric dam, and who attack a civilian boat, are they really in a position to tell us anything? If we are fighting them, it is to protect our civilians. And here, if they are waging war, it is not a matter of religion, it is not a geographical issue, north or whatever. No, they are waging war solely to reserve blocks, 20 of the Taudeni Basin for their master. Algiers, Paris, and certain capitals had already divided them up. The hydrocarbons, the market had already been divided, it was settled. But with the arrival of our patriotic military leaders at the head of the country, we tore all that up, all those bogus agreements, all those fake deals that had been made. How can Algiers itself, which opens its oil market to ExxonMobil and other companies, want to come and get its hands on Malian and Algerian oil? It's not going to work in local terms, as we say in Bamako. We're going to Sanjay, but you won't get any. It's not going to work. The war that's happening there is because of the resources in the north of our country. And in their struggle, the need for France is about stopping the contagion from the countries of the Sahel. For Algiers, everything should be done with France to find a puppet government in Bamako like they did in Haiti. And this puppet government will give up everything in the north, just as it is written in black and white in the famous Algiers Agreement. Oh yes, in the famous Algiers Agreement. That's exactly what's written in black and white. So we understood the war is about oil. It's an energy war. It's a war for uranium. That's what this war is about. But the excuse, the pretext for recruiting, maybe you have to bring up religious issues. There are people who are fanatics, who are passionate about religion, and as soon as you mention it, they get swept up in it. But that's not it. Far from it. Wasim Nasser still spreading his misinformation, so Al-Gabas and Jenin supposedly wrote to President Erdogan. Should Erdogan listen to armed bandits, armed terrorists who have the same ambitions as the PKK terrorists in Turkish territory? To want to endorse what is happening in Mali is also to legitimize the fight of the PKK terrorists against Turkey, even if they claim to have laid down their arms. So is Erdogan going to get caught up in this? Does he think Erdogan is as limited and as weak as Emmanuel Macron? Like Emmanuel Macron, I don't think so. That's not the case. So as we say, the dogs bark but the caravan moves on. This fight is only just beginning. And even better, to conclude, people of Africa, from very reliable sources, from consistent sources. As we said, all these attacks, when we talk about the coalition of these Algerian NATO mercenaries, is because the instructors of this Zelensky, who have made their way all the way to Mauritania, which, by the way, has an agreement within the framework of the networks revealed by Hillary Clinton and others, has a non-aggression pact with these armed terrorist groups. That is why, since 2011, their country has never been attacked. These terrorists, whom they call Jenin, FLA, were trained there in piloting Ukrainian drones, the very drones you now see in action. But Timbu needs to be careful, because we also know what's going on. So it's these drones, and they are trying to make moves with them. We understand we will adapt to the threats, rise to meet it, and our general staff, our intelligence services will eliminate these threats. This is a coalition. These are not just simple terrorists coming to attack us. No. It is a coalition of mercenaries, Algerian NATO mercenaries who are attacking our countries. We know it. It's no secret to anyone. So there's no point in trying to spread misinformation, making people believe that the Malian army or the armies in the east are dealing with just simple people who arrive on motorcycles and don't know what they're doing. These are very well-trained individuals. As General Chani said, some are even trained on Nigerian territory in drone piloting. It's the same on the Mauritanian side, the same everywhere the imperialists have established themselves. But this is war. Once again, we call on the authorities of the AS to mobilize at least 300,000 men. Since these terrorists are highly mobile on motorcycles, so mobilize enough volunteers on motorcycles. We'll see where they try to get through. Because with guerrilla warfare, you have to adapt, find a way to overcome it. And I think those who are following us, each of you might have a suggestion to make in the comment show to quickly put an end to a guerrilla movement. How to quickly deal with mercenaries of this kind. Your suggestions are welcome. We will take note of them and their proposals will be put forward. People of Africa, we thank you. It had to be done. We had to come back to dismantle the absurd lies of Wasim Nasser and his masters. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow for another top news topic. We thank you and take care. Thank you very much.